The objective today is to use console.log to debug simple issues related to event-driven programming. So here's a little summary of last time in computer science principles. Modern programming is often an event-driven rather than sequential process. Sequential programs start at a beginning point and progress to the end in a way that can be perfectly predicted when the program begins running. Now, event-driven programs do not progress in a predictable order. User-generated events, that is, mouse clicks, button presses, are each handled individually by pieces of code, one per event. For example, you want to write code so that when a user clicks button 1, something different happens from when they click button 2. Event-driven programs like these are dynamic, but also bring challenges since you don't know what order user events might happen in. It can lead to unpredictable program execution and an associated set of challenges. With that said, your Think Right Share is what is challenging about coding event-driven programs. Now, syntax errors are the kinds of problems that show errors in the console. In the grand scheme of things, syntax errors are easy problems to solve because a computer is telling you it can't understand something. You just have to find out what it is. Logic errors can be much harder to solve because a computer doesn't report anything wrong at all. The program just doesn't do what you think it should or want it to. Tracking down these kinds of errors is much harder and requires some practice to get used to. We suggest some techniques in the levels that follow. But first, a Think Right Share. Which of these two errors are more challenging to solve and why? So here's the thing that follows. Console.log is a command that allows you, the programmer, to print out text which the user cannot see. It is useful for displaying messages to yourself to figure out what is happening as your program runs. And this may even sound a little bit like comments, but it is even more useful than comments because it's actually testing your code to make sure it works and giving you feedback on that. So with that said, Think Right Share, what is console.log used for? As event-driven applications get more complex, it is easy to generate errors in a program, and the need to debug the program will become more prevalent. Now, in some instances, the error will be in the syntax of the program, that is, a missing semicolon or a misspelled function name. In other instances, however, programs will have logical errors, which the computer will not catch, and so can only be found by testing. Think Right Share, what types of errors are you prone to make when writing assignments, such as essays? On a personal note, I sometimes write myself into a corner in an essay because of logic. I may convince myself or the reader of something, but then think of a counter-argument while I'm writing that nullifies my original argument. So I'm not much of a grammar or spelling error kind of guy or a punctuation error person. I'm just writing myself in circles, especially if we're talking about essays on like politics or economics. So debugging and learning to interpret error messages is a critical step in the process of developing reliable software. Learning about yourself and the types of mistakes you typically make is one aspect of getting good at debugging. Learning how to insert a console.log statement into your code to display messages will give you insight into what your program is doing and is a universal technique of program development and debugging. So I found this pie chart out there, thought you would get a laugh out of it. And I think I fall in that pink range. The number one reason I use semicolons is to make crying faces in text messages. Event handling is an overarching term for the coding tasks involved in making a program respond to events by triggering functions. Here I'm asking you to tell me how comfortable you are adding buttons, images, and text to an app, and are you comfortable adding a simple on-event handler for a button or image? I know this is only day 2, but I don't want you to freak out over all the new things we're learning to do with programming. So as a quick test/check for understanding, I want you to name the event handler here in the code I'm displaying. So in the last lesson, you ended up making a simple chaser game, or at least set it up, and it's not much of a game. So in this lesson, we want to learn how to improve that by adding more screens and adding a way for the game to end. Now remember, last time you posted your code on Canvas, so feel free to go there and copy it to use again so you don't have to retype it, though it's not the end of the world if you have to retype code. It's good practice, and I'm hoping you feel more and more comfortable with the code as we go through this unit. I also want to say in the last lesson we looked at design mode, which is an easy way to add UI elements to our apps. This lesson is all about you getting a chance to use those new skills to make a multi-screen app. So if you haven't already, let's go ahead and go to this link. Here's your goal. Nice visual. I want you to get to part 9 in this lesson 2, found under Unit 5. And then tomorrow, or the next time we come together, we'll start coding up multiple screens. So here's some sample code. I want you to tell me what you think is going on in this code. Now, I had trouble following the directions on code.org using those console.log exercises, so I opened up another browser and everything worked fine there on Edge. So if you start hitting certain hurdles, try to be creative in your problem solving, and then of course ask me. A lot of times I find just turning something off and on again will fix it, or just using a whole nother program. In this case I used the internet browser Edge. So, the event object carries many details about the event that occurred. It is loaded with properties about the mouse for mouse events and the keyboard for keyboard events. Now, if it's your learning style, feel free to write down any or all of this code I'm showing you. I'm definitely a kinesthetic learner, so I have notebooks full of code at my house. I'll probably never look at them again or use them, but they're just sitting on my bookshelf looking fancy, and if anybody opened them up, they might think I'm a madman. But the act of writing really helps me remember stuff. So think right here, what does the event object do? And I'm adding some code down here with comments to help you out with that. So a quick parameters review here. There are different types. Such as a string. So there are many events that can be used with an event handler to respond to all kinds of actions that a user can take. And in block mode, you can choose from a drop-down list of more than 10. Data type of a string is also used when creating IDs. So the ID of the UI control to which this event handler applies must begin with a letter and contain no spaces and all these other things we've talked about before. And then even within your callback function, this is executed in response to an event for the matching UI element, aka the ID of the matching type. So the function can be inline or separately defined in your app and called from in an on-event keyword. So I like to think of all this stuff as you're a sorcerer or a wizard learning how to manipulate reality for the person using your app. So I like this quote, the most effective debugging tool is still careful thought coupled with judiciously placed print statements. And when they say print statements, they're referring to the console.log strategy I've explained to you. And this is from Brian Kernighan. Now, I have this book in my classroom, Unix for Beginners. I have a lot of Unix books, by the way. So if you're interested in those books, just ask and I'll show you where they are. The quote at the top of the page is from one of the authors of the first books about C programming language. It is still relevant and largely true today. So when you use console.log, we say that you are printing to the console. Almost all programming languages have some form of a print command, an easy way to see text output from your code, as opposed to printing on paper. So a sampling is shown to the right. And in the future, you might see a task that asks you to do something like write a loop that prints all the values to the console. That means write a loop with console.log statement in it. And I have to say, of all of these, the one I like the most is the C programming language, and the one I like the least is Java. Let's see if you can notice what makes Java different from all the rest, and that will give you a hint as to why I just do not like the Java programming language, period. So, that was it for the lesson. Choose an IB profile attribute to fill into the blank. When you're done with that, here's the DOL. You're going to copy and paste code from part 8 with the 3 console messages, just to prove you've named elements of your app and assigned actions to those event handlers. Don't forget to name your elements uniquely, so I know you've put in thought into your work. And this particular assignment's going to take me extra long to grade because I'm reading through the code, so just be patient with me, but I'll get you your feedback as quickly as possible.